Welcome back to the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Policki. He's Jacob Alberta. We're a Minnesota sports podcast. So if you're a Minnesota sports fan, especially a Minnesota Wild fan, please click the like button on this video because we're going to kind of talk you through how you should view this season for the Minnesota Wild, because obviously an incredible record-setting regular season, most points in franchise history. You got 6 players that set their career high in goals. Kaprizov and Fiala had the 2 best seasons in Minnesota Wild history points-wise. All this great stuff happened. The team was extremely close. They got rid of Parise and Suter. They kind of cleansed the locker room. Just a good group of guys that all wanted to play for each other. And then all of a sudden it comes to a screeching halt in Game 6 against the St. Louis Blues after the Wild were up 2-1 in the series and then just lost 3 in a row, a couple of those games being non-competitive. So let's just jump right into it, Alberta. I mean, how do you feel about the way the season ended? Do you think that should taint your view of the way the regular season went down as well? Like, how do you view this season as a whole?
I think the way it ended has to alter your viewpoint on the season as a whole, like in some capacity, because losing that way in the playoffs after having all the success you did in the regular season, all these franchise records you had, it was literally the best season we've ever put together in the 20-plus year franchise history that we have, and to just come out, like, especially flat in Game 1, but then bounce back, overcome adversity and win back-to-back, especially that first road game felt very resounding. That Game 3 at St. Louis felt like we set the tone and that it was the ball was back in our court, but then we lose 3 in a row to end the year, and that it was so weird because that just doesn't happen with these Dean Evison teams over the last couple of years. Like we don't lose games in consecutive fashion. So yeah, disappointing to say the least. I think playoff success is ultimately what everybody's going to remember down the road.
Yep.
So as much as we want to talk about this regular season, like you got to take it with a grain of salt, I guess, just because it ended this way, quite frankly. And I think for us, especially in that Game 6, I think the series loss in general and as a whole came down to us losing 2 games at the X. Like, we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can afford to drop 1 game, but 2 we just can't. Like, you got to win that Game 5, especially like you said. You go into the second, you're in the middle of the second period, you're up 2-1, and then you don't score again, and then you get to this Game 6 and just nothing. Like, came out with great energy in the first period, but St. Louis matched it, and we just had no answers. And then they're the best second period team in the league, and they just took over from that point. And then it was over because they were up 4-0 after 2 periods, and we didn't really stand a chance. So I think for us to end that way is just it's another in a long list of just disappointments as far as this team goes, or just our teams in general.
Yeah, I mean, entertainment value-wise, this Wild team is off the charts this season. Most fun I've ever had watching the Wild, without a doubt. But I agree with you. The way the playoffs went down completely changes my perception on the team. Like, Dean Evison had been rotating goalies all season long, and I'm not going to blame goalies for losing this series because the team in general just didn't show up to play the last few games of the series. But like Dean Evison rolls with Fleury, the first 5 games of the series, and then all of a sudden our backs are up against the wall. It's an elimination game. Let's throw in Cam Talbot, who hasn't played in 3 weeks. I mean, talk about being completely unfair to a guy who's been here for the last couple of years and has played well for you. Just throw him in a crappy situation and expect him to play well. And of course he's humiliated because that first goal he gave up was a softie. And the team just didn't play well in front of him, and they lost the game and lost the series. So I have a bone to pick with that. I have a major bone to pick with special teams. I know I keep reiterating it on this podcast, but Darby Hendrickson needs to be fired. He's a horrible special teams coach. Penalty kill's atrocious. The power play is even more atrocious. You can't have that kind of talent on your top unit of the power play and not throw the puck at the net and getting too cute with all these passes. I know a lot of it's on the players, but they have to be drilling it in these guys' heads that just shoot the puck at the net and make things happen, get redirections, get rebounds that get thrown to guys. Like, I don't know. I don't get their mentality on the power play. It's way too passive. It's way too relaxed. There's no urgency. So that's extremely frustrating. I thought, the defensemen were not good this series, and really, honestly, all of them. Like, Brodin did not play his best series. I thought Spurgeon had a lot of bad moments. It kind of set the tone in Game 1 where he cross-checked that dude in the back of the legs. That was a horrible look. And then from there on, he just didn't play that well. Dumbo was playing hurt, but I mean, the dude's a turnover machine. He's not a smart player. And then I don't know. I don't see the value with Dumba because he's always either hurt or he's turning the puck over, and his offensive value just hasn't been there the last couple of years. So, and then you got the other guys too, like Goligoski. He's old. You can't expect much from him. Kulikov and Merrill. I mean, come on, like, so it's tough. But I don't know. This is the hand they dealt themselves. Oh, I forgot Middleton. Middleton actually probably had the best series of all the defensemen, except I think it was game 5.
That was a costly mistake between him and Fleury that gave up that goal to give them the lead.
Exactly.
I can't remember. Was that to tie the game or take the lead? I think it was take the lead. But
I think it was to take the lead, yeah. It was their third goal. So,
and I feel like when the Blues scored one, they scored multiple in a short period of time in this series. And that's exactly what happened in that situation.
Game 5 was crucial because Kaprizov came out with his hair on fire and had 2 goals, both on the power play in the first period. Looked like he was going to have another hat trick like he did in game 1.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it game 2? I think it was game 2.
Game two, yeah, because game 1 we got waxed.
Yeah, so it looked like he was going to have another hat trick. And what ends up happening is the Wild go to sleep, and Vladimir Tarasenko ends up getting a hat trick of his own. And that was just a game changer right there, obviously. I mean, the real missed opportunity was game 4 when the Wild had a good chance. The Blues were down like 4 defensemen.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to say we were tied at 1 for a while, and then the Blues scored 2 quick goals, like you mentioned.
That sounds right.
It got to 3-1. The Wild chipped it down to 3-2, but they just couldn't get that, game-tying goal to force it to overtime or something. So, so many missed opportunities, and it's alarming, really, because in my mind, this team cannot get any better going into next season. The cap is going to get tighter. You're probably going to lose Kevin Fiala, especially after he kind of no-showed this series. I'm not going to dog him for it because he had a great regular season. And some guys just have tough series every now and then in the playoffs. But, obviously you'd like to see him show up and make an impact. But he's probably going to get traded, I would imagine, just because, they're not going to want to pay him, especially after a series like that. Matt Dumba could still get traded, and the goalie situation is mucky too, because now apparently, Talbot's obviously unhappy with the way they handled him. Fleury's a free agent. Like, there's so many question marks now, and you're never going to get the same production from Ryan Hartman again. You'll probably never get the same offensive production from Marcus Foligno again. Some of these guys that had career seasons, you're never going to get that again. So I just, 113 points, there's no way they're getting back to that mark next year. I don't even know if they'll get to 100 points next year. Like, I'm kind of worried about the way this thing's going, because it was looking promising, but the way it ended, I know Guerin's going to want to shake things up, I'm sure, a little bit, but losing Fiala is going to be a massive issue for this team. That's a lot of goals and points you're going to have to replace there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. You're right. I bring it back to this series real quick, though. I was gonna bring up, actually, you talked about special teams. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was looking back through that today, looking at this series as a whole, and I saw our penalty kill was like 69% or something. It was bottom 4 among all playoff teams this year. And then our power play, it felt like a great microcosm in Game 6 of the way the season's felt like all along, where we go a solid 0 for 5, and it was just opportunity after opportunity where we could have got back into the game. We just didn't. And we didn't make it happen. And that's why a guy like Darby Hendrickson's got to go. And then also on that power play, like you said, it also comes down to players just making things happen. And it comes down to guys like Fiala, for instance, or really any of the forwards, like who did anything besides Ek and Kaprizov in this series. I feel like everybody else is a no-show, let alone like Fiala, especially. Like, he's supposed to be one of our stars, but everybody else too. And Fiala having the 0 goals and 16 penalty minutes or whatever it was, like, that just can't happen. So kind of take a look at this roster makeup as a whole and what's really going to make this team a championship contender. Like, do you run it back or try to run it back as much as possible? I mean, you're talking about the goalie situation with Talbot and Fleury. I personally think it was the right move for Evason to opt to Fleury for most of it. Just, it's a really delicate and tricky situation to handle. I think that was kind of the risk worth taking, because obviously Fleury's got the track record to back it up with 3 Stanley Cups, and I know Talbot has definitely played well for us as long as he's been here, but it's just like the track record was there for Fleury, and it's hard not to trust him. And I don't think it mattered what goalie you're rolling out there, and it was the chance worth taking to really fracture your relationship with Talbot here in order to try and take a stab at winning this thing this year. So lots of decisions like that to really iron out. And then kind of going back to the defensemen too, looking at the roster makeup as a whole, along with like the Fiala decisions and Dumbo and whatnot, going even a little bit deeper, it kind of brings me back to those signings in the middle of the season with the extensions for like Goligoski and John Merrill. It's like kind of wondered at the time why, and now I'm wondering even more now because these guys were terrible when it mattered most in the playoffs. So it's like, what are we really doing here? Like, are we just treading water by signing these guys to deals that's like, do we really feel good about rolling them out there again? I don't know. That doesn't feel like a great answer. I feel like we got to have something better than that. But with the cap constraints, who knows? So there's a lot to be frustrated with right now. But maybe this playoff loss is just too fresh yet too.
Last thing I want to talk about, we'll get into videos about what they should do this offseason and how to improve this team.
All these different things, yeah.
But one thing I want to talk about is the leadership on this team.
Yeah.
This is tough. I am proposing that they strip Jared Spurgeon of the C.
All right.
I don't think he's a good leader. I think he's too quiet, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But maybe he can be an alternate captain. Marcus Foligno should be the captain of this team, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think
he's the motor. He's the energy. He's everything. He's the heartbeat of this team. And, he'll go after guys. He was nailing guys. I think it was game 5 when, Kaprizov was flying around scoring goals. Foligno was flying around nailing guys. It was fantastic for about a period and a half, and then the Wild fell apart. And, where's Jared Spurgeon, the captain, to pick everyone up and say, this crap stops now? We got to wake up. I mean, you got no sense of that. And then game 6, they completely come out no-show in an absolute must-win game to get it back home for a game 7. So, yeah, I'm done with Jared Spurgeon. I also think Kaprizov is deserving of an alternate captain because A, he's one of the top 7 players in the NHL. B, there's been articles written about how his leadership is stepping up, even though he still doesn't speak perfect English and, he needs a translator in press conferences and stuff. Like, everything everyone says about this guy is he's a great guy and a great leader. He is deserving of an alternate captain, role on this team. So, you assume, maybe you lose Dumba. I would strip Spurgeon of the captaincy. That opens up 2 spots right there. Foligno gets to C. I'd give an A to Caprice. I mean, I don't know this stuff really matters, like what the patch on the jersey is, but just in terms of like who are the leaders on this team, and what kind of impact are they making? Because Jared Spurgeon made 0 impact in this playoff series, and that was very frustrating to watch. Same with Dumba, just a complete liability for the most part. So you can't have 2 of your captains, playing horribly in a playoff series.
No, for sure. And yeah, Kaprizov definitely feels deserving, and even going higher up the chain there with who our captain is. I think John was right when he mentioned that when Koivu retired, and Koivu didn't retire yet because he went to Columbus for a spell, but or that cup of coffee. But once he was gone, then this was open, and kind of wondered like who it should be. And I remember John Mann, he said that it should be Foligno. Like he's kind of the loudest voice in the room, and I think he's a great leader, looking out for everybody. He goes after anybody against him that's going after our own guys and taking these cheap shots and whatnot. So I think he's definitely the guy, and I agree with your take that I think Spurgeon can be an alternate, whatever, but I think Foligno, yes, I think he can be the captain.
And I think Eriksson Ek's another guy that's deserving of some look there too, because I know he's worn the A when guys have gotten hurt. Zuccarello has as well, but Zuccarello is kind of tough because like he also didn't play well in the playoffs, and like how much longer is he really going to be around? He's getting older, so I know none of that. It's all like secondary stuff because it doesn't really factor into how they play. But I just think they cleaned out that locker room of Parise, Suter, Koivu, Stahl. They got rid of all those guys.
Yeah,
but Spurgeon was here through a lot of that. And I'm not saying he's toxic like those guys are, but he might just not be that great of a leader. They probably gave it to him by default because he's been with the Wild the longest out of, I think, all those guys.
Yeah, I think you might be right. It might be one of those things. And yeah, don't get me wrong, Spurgeon's nice to have on the team. And I didn't mind at the time giving him the captaincy, but at this point, yeah, maybe that's another thing you could consider in the offseason among many others. And others more probably important things to look at first, but I think this is certainly something to evaluate.
The only player that you can really defend, the only person really in the Wild organization that you can defend in this series is Kaprizov.
Yeah, true.
Maybe Eriksson Ek, he had a good couple games, but he kind of trailed off towards the end of the series too. So I would say Kaprizov's about the only person you can defend. Everybody else, every decision that was made, every, player that played, question it all. I mean, nobody should be safe from criticism here. This was a complete letdown. This team had much higher expectations. They were capable of going so much further. Even if they got stomped by Colorado in the second round, at least they would have advanced. I mean,
yes,
the Wild haven't advanced to the second round since 2015. Minnesota teams in general just don't advance to the second round of the playoffs very often at all. And we'll save that for another video another day, probably coming up this week, because I got some thoughts on that that's extremely frustrating too. I know every now and then we do the state of Minnesota sports, but yeah, we're going to have to do another one of those because I got some thoughts. But super frustrating. Obviously, they're capable of so much more. And now it just feels like they're probably going to have to take a step or two back again for the next couple of years due to the cap constraints before they can really, start to forge ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I think this will be a long off season, and the problem is you look at next year, you think about how do we get better from this, and regular season, you almost feel like you can't. Like it'd be very hard to top this. So you're just trying to play for another opportunity to get back here, but you got to go through the whole grind again of the season just to get here and have that chance again. And who knows? I mean, there's no guarantees. And this year we had the home ice that we just didn't take advantage of, and you hope to get back to that spot, but it's really hard to get even there, and then to build on top of that, advancing in the playoffs and having success. So, man, it feels like a dark time, I guess, for this franchise. And in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And based on the moves Guerin makes, maybe it looks promising going into next year. Even if he trades Fiala, hopefully he gets a good return for him. I know people are floating out. Maybe New Jersey would trade the number 2 pick. I don't know. I doubt they would do that, but it's also not a strong draft either. So there's all these thoughts out there. But if you can get a decent return for Fiala, maybe you can, you open up some cap space. You can sign a decent free agent, especially on defense.
Yeah.
Straighten the goalie situation out one way or the other, whether it's Fleury or Talbot. And then you obviously have to bring in a backup, but you're only a year away probably from that Jesper Wallstedt, who's our stud goalie prospect. So, he might be able to patchwork this thing a little bit, but yeah, like you said, it's not going to be as good as it was this season, especially in the regular season. And just disappointing ending, but it's Minnesota, and we've all come to expect that at this point, I think.
Yeah, I know. It's just too many scars, too many wounds, too many things to think back on now. Just can't keep track of them all. But it's terrible. And I love they brought up too. I think you kind of slid that in there. Give me another good defenseman. I'm sick of rolling out some of these guys. It's just abysmal, and that killed us. It's partially what killed us in this playoff exit.
Yeah, I'm fine with a Goligoski Merrill third pairing.
Yeah,
but they're okay. Yes, exactly. Goligoski can't be on the second defensive pairing, so that can't be happening. So yeah, I agree. Get another defenseman in here. I'd like to see Middleton get re-signed too. I think he's a restricted free agent. I'd really like to see him back because he really did play well with us for the most part. Keeping him and Spurgeon together, Brodin, he'll probably need a new partner if Dumba gets traded. Maybe it's Kalen Addison, maybe it's somebody else, but all things to monitor for sure. But we'll wrap it there. So that will do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Like I mentioned earlier, please click the like button on this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. Feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram and let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on how the Wild season turned out? Do you view it as a success or not? And what are your thoughts on the team going forward, as there's a million questions to answer in this upcoming offseason? So let us know your thoughts in the comment section. And until next time, thanks for watching.